I'll just record it to my computer. Okay. So I'm going to be switching between a lot of tabs when I'm presenting. So I have my presentation. So I will show you guys, I'll give you guys 2 minutes after I explain something to see whatever's on the slide so you can try out what I was doing. And then I'll also be switching to the iOS simulator to actually run whatever code. So let me start by just sharing my screen, starting with the presentation. 1 second. Okay, so we're just gonna be building a really, can everyone see my screen? Okay, we're just gonna be building a really simple personal finance app, nothing really fancy at all. It's just to give people an introduction to using React Native because that can be useful for a hackathon. You can really make some nice mobile apps with it. And specifically, we're gonna be using Expo, so I'll explain what that is in a second. So you guys had to do some prerequisites before. I'm just going to leave this up for a second while I'm talking in case anyone needed to see this again or whatever. But React Native, it's a JavaScript framework. It's mostly used for mobile app development, like I said. And some of you might be familiar with app development using this framework, or maybe using Android Studio or Flutter. And usually you write code for your app and you have to export it yourself separately for iOS and Android, and you have to do that here. But Expo makes that so much easier. It basically encapsulates the export process or the publishing process for Android and iOS. So we mostly just have to worry about writing the code. We don't have to worry too much that it might not whatever we code is not compatible for iOS or not compatible for Android. It's generally pretty okay. And yeah, it just makes our job so much easier. So 1 second. Okay, so we are just going to be using the blank template. Hopefully no one had too many problems with the setup. I know that NPM can cause problems, and the new version of Node.js, I think, was not compatible with Expo. So if you were running into problems with that, try downgrading a version and it should be okay. And to run the app, maybe you guys tried it out when you set up the blank template. We'll be running it by typing into our terminal yarn start. Yarn is our package manager or dependency manager. You might have used it before, or maybe you've used NPM. We're just going to be using that for installing all of our dependencies and everything. And you have to make sure that your phone, if you're using your phone to run the app, is connected to the same network that your computer is on. You can't use cellular data or a personal hotspot. It won't really work. And also, it'll take a few seconds to load, and you'll have to scan the QR code if you're using your phone, using your camera app, and then click on the link that pops up, and you should have the Expo app downloaded and make an account so that you can run the app on there. Okay, so I'm going to start coding in a second, but just wanted to show you guys this slide before we get started. This is how the app.js screen is going to look when you first run the app. So this code was already here once you create a new Expo project. So now I'm just going to go to my code. I'll have to reshare my screen. Okay, so here I have that code that I was showing you guys, and I'll just explain some of what's going on if most people aren't familiar with React Native. Anyways, so React Native is a component-based programming, and each of our different screens that we're going to be having in our app will be their own components, and we are going to build them up on our own. And in our app, we're only going to have one screen because I just, like I said, wanted to give an introduction to React Native because it's useful in hackathons. And right now, app.js is the main screen, and we can think of it as the main point or the entry point of our app. And the other files you should get familiar with that already came with the starter code or app.json and the yarn.lock file. So app.json contains the different configurations for app, the different ways that it's supported on iOS or Android, the name of the app, and the version. So you can see that my folder where this is contained is my app, and then there's the version and everything. And then yarn.lock is just contains all the dependencies. Maybe when you download a dependency using Yarn, you saw that it said it updated the lock file. So this is the lock file that it was updating. You generally should not be editing this manually. It only gets edited when you download a dependency. Okay, so let's go to the next slide, and then I will start coding. Sorry about like the back and forth with showing you guys. That's kind of how it is when you have to like have a slideshow and also code at the same time and run it. So we're going to be adding some screens and also some navigations for the screens. And we're going to create a folder, a source folder, and then put all our screens within that. And then we're going to be downloading, adding some dependencies using Yarn for the navigation and importing that. So let's do that. So let me go to the code. And then I'll bring back this slide after I do that. 1 second. Okay. So I'm going to go to app.js. And I'm going to first download in the terminal the needed dependencies. So we're going to be adding the React navigation dependency. So I'm going to say yarn add React navigation. That's native. Oh yeah, make sure that you're in the right folder. I was not in the right folder. So I'm going to go into right folder. Okay, I am. Never mind. So yeah, I'm gonna let that run. And you're gonna get a lot of warnings because there are some problems sometimes where one dependency you use might not be caught up or it might be deprecated. That's like a problem you'll run into if you're like trying to publish the app. You should think about that. But for our purposes right now, like we're just trying to get some practice. And I'm talking about like if you're trying to get your app published to the App Store or something. So I think there's a question. Let me put the command in the chat. 1 second. I was going to go back to the PowerPoint in a second, so you guys can have that too. Okay. So that's the first thing we're running. It's taking some time. It will, because it seems like it's a larger dependency. Dorita, can you explain what your question was exactly? Or you can PM me again. Okay. So now I'm going to add another dependency that's needed via Expo. So I'll also send this in the chat in a second. So it's Expo install React Native screens, and then React Native safe area context. So let me send that in the chat. I'm just going to let it run for a second. Okay. Okay, so on Visual Studio Code, it's just like any other editor. You'd go to File, Open, and then you have to look for the folder wherever you started your like app. So when you set up the Expo app initially, you'd go in your desktop or wherever and find that, and then open it. So to downgrade that, I can get back to you in a second. If it says Expo command not found, that means you didn't correctly download Expo. So you might have to install Yarn again and then install Expo, because you can only install Expo via Yarn or NPM, and we're using Yarn for our package manager. If you guys have more questions on that kind of software stuff, you guys can PM me later, because I want to keep going through like the rest of the material. Okay. Sorry about that. And then I sent the second command for what we're going to be installing in the chat. It was the Expo installation, and then we have one more thing we want to install. So we're going to say yarn add React navigation / stack, because we're going to be using the stack navigator. Oh yeah, I'll share the slides with you guys too. Should have done that before. I'm going to share the slides at the end as well, and then also the GitHub for the code. Okay. So here's the slideshow. So I just installed the last dependency we needed for the navigation. Let me send that as well. So that was yarn add React navigation / stack. Okay. And then now, since I've installed all those dependencies, I can use them. So to use them, we need to import it. So I'm going to say import create stack navigator from whatever we just installed, React navigation / stack. And then I have to import the navigation container, and I'll explain what all this means in a second. Okay. And then I'm going to create the constant like stack navigator. This basically just allows me to use, it's like a local instance of the stack navigator that I can use. Okay. So is everyone with me so far with installation of the dependencies and also like importing? I know some people were running into issues with installing Expo and like Node, but you guys can feel for those kind of issues, feel free to message me after the meeting and I can help you guys out, because that is, I feel like also very hard to get over. And you might want to like resolve those issues before like hackers so that you know once the hackathon comes how to like troubleshoot with like dependencies and whatnot. But is everyone with me so far with what code we've written so far? Any questions? Okay, so now let me just explain about React navigation a little bit. So it's stack-based. So after we installed the needed dependencies, as you saw, we imported the necessary components for navigation, and we created a constant called stack, which utilizes the stack navigator or imports to create stack navigator. And yeah, so now let's go on to the next slide. So I'm going to the adding screens was navigation if you're following along with the link I sent. Yes, the Zoom recording will be posted later, I think before the hackathon, if you guys want to go back to it. So I'm going to start with the navigation, 1 second. So I'm in app.js, and before, I'm just going to comment out all we have over here. We don't really need this right now. And I'm going to start with the navigation container. So this is the container for like all the different pages you might have. In our app, like I said, we're going to have one page, but if you were to have multiple pages, all of them should be in the navigation container. Navigation, like screen navigation in React Native is not that complicated, I'd say, but I feel like there's a lot of different ways of doing it. Might have like tab navigation, whatnot, but this gives you a good introduction if you want to do something basic, which I think would be helpful to a lot of you guys. And then I'm going to use the stack navigator for our specific page. And then I'm gonna just leave that for now. So we need to create our second page because app.js, like I said, is like the engine. We obviously don't want our main page to say, welcome to app.js, like edit this or whatever, like start working on your app. So we're going to make another screen for us. So I'm going to make a directory. So I'm back in the terminal right here. There's another question in the chat. Okay. I'm in the terminal right now. I'm just going to make this bigger. Okay. That was really big. And I'm going to make a directory called src. And then I'm going to go into this directory and make another one for all our screens. Okay. So there's the folder created. And then I'm going to make the file. So I'm just going to say touch. That just creates a new file. And I'm going to call it setup.js. So this page is going to be like your finances setup page, like how much money you're trying to put in your budget, what your expenses are, and whatnot. Okay, so I'm just going to create that file, and it's a JavaScript file, so make sure you call it setup.js. So I like to just use the terminal to do this. If you guys want in your editor, you could obviously have just done file, new file. That's pretty self-explanatory. Okay. So far as you can see, the code is very contained. We have the navigation container and then the stack-based navigator. And now we're going to add in this page, setup.js. Okay, so we don't have any code in setup.js yet, but that's all right. We'll add some in a second, but let's first add the page to the navigation. So I'm going to say stack.screen. And our screen is called, let's call it manage your finances. That's basically going to be the name of the header page. So you can call it whatever you want. Maybe you want to say my finances, whatever you want. That's going to be the header at the top. So I'm just going to say manage your finances. Okay. And then the component is going to be the setup.js file. So the component is the setup component. I'm just going to put on the toggle word wrap so that it, okay. So the component is going to be the setup component. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure if I have a, okay, that's good. And then I need to make sure to import the file as well so that the stack.screen knows where to get setup from. So I'm going to say import setup, which is a component, just like these are all components, like navigation container is a React file. It's a React component, but it's in the React code, like whatever the developers created, obviously, right? So this is how we were importing that component. Now we're importing our own setup component from our folder. So we need to put the path to the folder. So that's going to be this. So that now should be good. So import setup from here. Okay. Just going to get rid of this so that it's more organized. Okay. Cool. So Stack Navigator has screen components as its children, and also we're going to be adding the initial route name so that the first page is the setup page. So in Stack Navigator, I'm going to just set up our screen options. Okay. And then here I can put like the style I want for the header. So I'm going to make the background color. I can make it like blue if I wanted. And then I need to add some more details like the header tint color I could add. And I have this same in the slides as well. This is like another shade for the tint. And then I want the initial route or the initial page to be the setup page. Okay. So this will make sure that it goes to the setup page first. So is everyone with me so far? Does everything make sense? Okay, and also I wanted to explain what we have here. So this is like the styling for our components. Before we had the view component in the code, I just deleted it. And that was using the styles over here. So for our different components, right, we could add the styles here and just say, and use them, just import them into our code here. And we'll be doing that for the next page, but for now, we're just gonna leave this like this. Okay. Now I'm going to run this on my iOS simulator. Sorry, I had to organize my pages again because I'm going to be moving around a little bit to run this. So we can say yarn.start to run our code. And I might be running into some issues because the iOS simulator sometimes is a little slow. But since I obviously can't show you guys like my phone screen, I'm going to be running it on that. But I'd suggest you guys run it on your phone. And I'll show you guys the simulator once it opens up. And for that, I had to type I. So as you can see in the terminal, it gives you options. If you want to open Android simulator, iOS simulator, or you want to open it in your web browser, or if you want to reload or whatever, it's right there. Okay, sorry. Just gonna turn my video off for a second because my computer really slows down with the simulator. That just makes it even slower. Okay, sorry, there's a issue. We have an error in our code that happens all the time with this. Oh yeah. So, okay, the issue obviously is that we don't have anything in our setup.js file yet, so it's not gonna be able to display anything, but it will in a second when we add code to that. Okay, so let's start working on that file. So I'm gonna be jumping around a little bit. So now I'm going to the slide that says setting up our initial page, and we're gonna be working in the setup.js file. Okay. So now I want to import some components that I can use. View, text, the style sheet, and text input. And this is all from React Native. And then I'm going to set up our page. So I'm just going to call this setup. Okay, and then I'm going to set up my first component with the review. And then I want to add some style for it. So we can add that in a second. But I'm first just going to set up the text components as well. And I want to title my page. So I'm going to call it my budget planner. One second. Okay. Or I can call it like monthly budget or whatever you want if you don't want to give it a title. So I'm just going to call this monthly budget. And then I'm going to add a text input. Sorry. And that's just going to take in like what you want your budget to be. So here, I'm just going to say the placeholder, and that's going to equal to enter your budget, because that's the question we want to ask. And then so once the text changes, we want it to do something. So we want it to basically save the text because we can use that later. Sorry. Okay. So that's like our initial input, our text input for to enter our monthly budget. So we also want to be able to save whatever value we gave. So we're going to set up the constants for that. And I'm just going to call that text and set text. And maybe you see that right here. That's this same reference to that set text. And I'm going to say use state. And I'll explain what that is in a second. Okay. Okay, so we need to capture the value that the user is entering. So we created this text constant and the setter for it. And set text, if you notice, it uses state. It says use state. So this helps to capture what we've entered. And usually we use this in React and React Native if we have some sort of dynamic value we want to capture. And that's what we want to do, right? Because this text input, it's going to be dynamic. Okay, so I'm going to finish working on this text input. And then we want the default value to equal 0. And the keyboard type to be numeric. Okay. Is everyone with me so far? Do you guys have any questions? If we don't get through the whole presentation, I will be sending the GitHub in the as well, so you guys have access to that. Okay, so I'm going to try rerunning it right now. Bear with me if I run into any issues. Actually, I will be running into an issue. Forgot to add one more thing I needed to explain to you guys. So we need to export this component. I just forgot to add that. So we need to say export default setup. Otherwise, this file right here won't know, like it won't be able to capture the setup screen. It won't be able to get the component. Okay. And I think the path might be wrong over here. So let me fix that. Okay. We had to export this at the bottom of setup.js. We have to say export default setup so that this file app.js, it knows what we're talking about basically. So I'm running into some issues right now with the path for setup. So I do have the working file open as well. So just let me give me 1 second to open that up. Sometimes when you're coding in front of a lot of people, it always doesn't work at that second. So bear with me. Okay. So I'm going to share this one instead. Can everyone see my screen now? Again? Okay, so I'm gonna run it here. And this is the same setup.js file. There's some extra code in it. I'm gonna go back to the previous file, but I just wanted to run it and show you guys how to do that. And you'll get some warnings, but that's all right for now. Okay. So this was the previous one. It's going to reload. And this is the simulator, iOS simulator. So dismiss this 1 second. Let me close the simulator because I think it's stuck on the previous one. So if you get a warning previously or an error and you're using the simulator or your Expo app, you might have to restart, like close the app or close the simulator and run it again, because otherwise the warning message doesn't go away. And it's going to take a minute. Sorry about that. But in the meantime, while that is trying to run, I'm going to go back to our code and we can continue with our code because that's not going to change too much. Okay. Okay. So now I'm back to setup.js. I'm just going to continue with this. The simulator was still loading. Sharing stopped. 1 second. Okay, is everyone seeing my screen again? When the simulator crashed, not crashed, when it reloaded, it stopped sharing for a second. So now I'm back to this. Okay, so now I'm gonna add in some more components to the setup page. So we have our text input, and then we also want to add a display for how much money we have remaining. So I'm going to create a text component for that. And I'm just going to call that remaining money. Okay. And then I thought we can add some styles to this page as well. So there's a few different ways that we can style our page. Like I mentioned before, we can either add in the style right here. I could say style is equal to, and then add in all the ones, any style I want, like the color, the alignment, whatever, for each component separately. Or if I know that I want my subtitles to look a certain way, I want my titles to look a certain way, and I want the general view to look a certain way, I can just generalize that and create like a style sheet. So I'm going to do that over here. So I'm going to say constant style equal to style sheet create and screen. So I want the screen to have a flex of maybe 0.5. That just basically adds like padding or like flexibility to the different components that are displayed in the view. And then I want the content to be justified in the center. And I want the items to be aligned in the center. And I also want to add in like a title style, maybe like for the different displays, like for the money, for the monthly budget, remaining expenses, I want them to maybe be titles or subtitles. So I'm just gonna set up some style for that. I can say the font size, it's like 40. And you might want to play around with whatever app you're making, you might want to play around with different font styles and whatnot. And you can also use Bootstrap, but right now we're just focusing on the basics. So I'm not going to go too much into that. Okay. And now I can use the styles. So I'm going to go back up to the components. And I'm going to say view style is equal to styles dot screen. This is the styling for the overall screen. So we had set up a type here called screen, and that's exactly what I invoked over here. And then I want the monthly budget to be like a subtitle. So I'm going to say style is equal to styles dot subtitle. And then the text input, I'm not adding any styling for that. I'm just going to leave that as is. And then also for the remaining money display, I also want to add the same subtitle styling. Okay, so we have that. Now I thought we can also add in like our different expenses we might want. So let's go ahead and do that. And then maybe we also want to keep track of how much money we've spent so far. So we can add another text component that displays that. And I'm just going to call that spent so far. Okay. And obviously I was running into some issues with the iOS simulator. So, but in general, when I'm running it on my iPhone, I like to constantly keep reloading it or saving, and then it'll do a hot reload. So you don't have to like open it up again. If you run into errors, you will have to, but usually you don't. And then you can see it update like whatever changes you made. And that's always nice to see as you're coding. And that's why like the Expo app on your phone is like perfect for that. Okay. So I have these three components, the monthly budget, where you'll enter in the text input, and then the remaining money, it's going to display in a second. We're going to be adding some code for that. Going to display the remaining money, and then also how much money we've spent so far, depending on the expenses that we'll be entering. Yes, I'll show you the styles code. So if someone wanted to see that. It's also in the presentation, and I am skipping around a little bit because sometimes when you're explaining, it's hard to stick to the exact order. Yeah. And I also wanted to emphasize for people who are new to React that it's easier also to use this kind of styling because you can, you don't have to go through and like, change each style. Like if you were to set up the style for each one separately, instead of generalizing it like this, you'll have to go and change each one if you want to play around with it. This makes this so much easier. And sometimes we can also create our own like style.js file, import that, like we had imported setup.js. We can import style.js. We can import that file, and that will work as well. But usually, yeah, either way works, either like setting up the style here or having its own file. So I'm going to get back to what I was doing before. Okay, so let's add some fields for like specific expenses. I had a question. Okay, let's add in like a few fields, sorry, for specific expenses. And I'm gonna make that a little bit more interesting. Instead of maybe displaying it as text, let's add some icons. So for your expenses, you might have food expenses, other shopping expenses, travel, going out, entertainment, whatever, right? So let's use some icons to display that. And I'll explain what I mean in a second. So Icons are available in React Native as like another like component or library, and you have to go to the React Native vector component icons that are available and see what we can use. So before we do that, we have to install some dependencies in order to use these components. So I'm going to go back to the terminal and I'm going to install this dependency. And I'm going to say yarn add React Native elements. And then I'll send it in the chat, basically what I was doing. Okay. And then we want to import icon from React Native elements. I'm going to put this at the top. Okay. And let me show you guys 1 second this page where you can see what icons are available. And generally, like, it's easier to use ones that will like look fine on iOS and Android, because sometimes some of them don't show up properly. So let me find this page so you guys can also use this. Okay. I'll put it in the chat. Okay, so now I'm back to setup.js, and I'm going to add these icons. So before we do that, I'm just gonna add a title called expenses. So I'm gonna have another text component, and I want to make this like a title. I want to bold it, or I might want to make it bigger, basically. So I'm just gonna use the title component, and I can add like a font weight if I wanted to, if I wanted to bold it. So I'm going to call this expenses. And then the style is going to be equal to styles.title. Okay, cool. And I've already picked some icons to use. So I'm just going to go ahead and use those. So I have an icon component, and then I can add some styling for the icon as well. So like how I want it to like be displayed, like the flex of it. So I'm gonna add that down here. Okay. And then I'm gonna use, for the first one, I'm just gonna have the like a food icon. So I went to the page and I found one, and it was called fast food. So this should be in here. Okay. So yeah, this should be good. And then I want to be able to input how much money I want to allocate, or how much money I spent on food. So what did I do to add for the icon style? Like, so I added like the icon styling I wanted in the style sheet at the bottom of the page, like I had for like subtitle, title, and like the screen itself. And then I called that styling icon. So then when I went here, I said style is equal to styles.icon, just like above here for the text, I said styles.title. So hopefully that makes more sense. I hope that answered your question. And then I want to add a text input again. And I want the placeholder to be $0 because obviously we don't have anything in there yet. Okay, and then on change text. And also if you're, for those of you who maybe are new to like VS Code, it's also great because like for languages like React, where you're like using so many different dependencies and there's all sorts of things going on, it like prompts you just like any other editor, but I think VS Code's great too. There's another question. Okay. So similar to the on change text event here, I'm going to need to use a set, like a setter. So I'm gonna set that up as well up here. So I'm just gonna call that food, set food, and it's going to use state as well. So if I say on change text, new food is equal to set food, new food, and then the default value is just going to be 0. There's nothing there. Just what's displayed. And then again, the keyboard type, we want it to be numeric. Okay. Okay, so everyone with me so far? And also if you try running this, like what I've been coding so far, it might be a little bit janky, like might be messed up, like the formatting. I usually do that like at the end. I just wanted to show you guys, since we didn't have too much time, like how like the different items we're going to be adding, like icon and whatever. So now let's add another icon, like for shopping maybe. So I'm going to use the same styling. And I'm going to say the name of this icon that I looked up, it was called shopping cart. Okay. So I want to add in a text input after this for the shopping amount, like how much money you want to allocate. And again, the same stuff, you should be pretty familiar. And we need to set up our use state constants. So here it's going to be, you can call it shopping and set shopping. And as you can see, like we have not used text, food, or shopping yet, like those variables. We're going to be using that when we display how much money we have remaining, because we obviously need to calculate that out of like the total amount, like your monthly budget. And I know this is kind of simple, it's just basic math, but the point of like this simple exercise I wanted to emphasize is that it gets you more familiar with the component-based programming and how to use the different dependencies and whatnot. Okay. So here I'm going to say new shopping. Okay, and the default value is going to equal 0. And keyboard type is going to be numeric. Okay. And I'm going to add in one more icon. And I'm just going to do this, like we could maybe do it for travel. So I'm just going to add that icon in. Actually, I'm going to skip this step because we don't have too much time left, because I think you guys probably get the hang of like using the different icons now. I wanted to show you guys how to use like a scrolling component because that's useful too. It's like when you have a lot of different things going on a single page, like you won't be able to scroll, obviously. Like on your phone, you might be like, that's kind of like trivial, like you expect that on any app, but that's something we have to explicitly like set up here as well. It's another component. So to do that, we're going to add in scroll view. So we're going to need to import that at the top. So we have some imports already. And here we can just type, it's imported from basic React Native. So we can just say scroll view. Okay. So for the scroll view, I'm going to add in some style as well because it's a component. Sorry. And the background color is going to be white. And this is like the margins on the sides. I'm just going to set to 25. Okay. And then I'm going to add in the scroll view, and that's going to go before the whole view for the page itself. This needs to go down here. I'm just going to format this. Okay. And then the style is going to be styles dot scroll view. Okay, cool. So this adds in like some basic scrolling for our page. And what we've done so far is basically add in some different text components for whatever we're trying to, like our expenses, and also for like to display like how much money we have remaining. Unfortunately, my iOS simulator is like acting up. It keeps freezing my computer, but I'm going to show you guys like how it should be looking in the presentation. So let me share my screen and go back to the presentation. Sorry. Okay. Okay, let me go back. Okay, so this is how the page should be looking so far. This is a screenshot where it was like kind of messed up because obviously there's an expense here, but we have our icons, and then we have the input we wanted, and then the different displays for whatever values we had entered. So I just wanted to, like, we only have like 2 minutes left, and I wanted to just go over some ideas, like if you like were to continue with this app. So let me go to the end. So we can add some Bootstrap to or other styling to improve the UI. We can also maybe add an interactive pie chart. Unfortunately, I didn't get to show you guys how the fields change as I enter in values because my simulator was being annoying. Like, if I could show you on my phone, I would. And we can add an interactive pie chart that would change as we change the different values. And maybe we can add some personalization, like if you're a college student, young professional, or if you're retired. You can also maybe do some user authentication where people can make accounts for your app, and then also maybe a chat bot that helps people manage their finances. So I hope this gave you guys like a good introduction to some app development with React Native. That was the emphasis on that, so that it kind of gets rid of that first step that sometimes you have to figure out how to even set anything up, use dependencies when you're like starting off at like a hackathon, and that takes up a lot of time. So hopefully that cut that down. I will be sharing the presentation and the code, the GitHub repository. I'll send that in the GroupMe in the Slack. And then if you guys have any other questions, feel free to message me on Slack, or you can ask me right now. I'm going to stop the recording.